You ever hear something that doesn't belong in this world? It was a rainy Tuesday night when the package arrived. No return address. Just my name, Ethan Crow, scrawled in thick black ink across the top. That alone was strange. I don't give out this address. Hell, it's barely on a map. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. It was the weight. Not heavy, but dense. Like something inside was holding its breath. I took it inside. Laid it on the kitchen table next to my half-drunk coffee and Glock. It was a small box, maybe 6 inches wide, taped shut like someone wanted it to stay that way forever. I cut it open. Inside a cheap cassette recorder, a pair of old headphones, and one single tape labeled, "Don't Listen Alone." I knew better, but I pressed play anyway. At first, there was nothing but static, the kind that makes your teeth itch. Then breathing, shaky, panicked. A woman's voice whispering, "My name is Jenna Hall. I don't think I have much time. If someone finds this, please don't come looking for me. I made a mistake. I thought I could escape it. But it's already here. It knows I'm recording. I think it wants me to." The sound of her breath quickened. Then silence, but not silence. You know the kind I mean. The kind that breathes, that lives in the corners of the room. Something shuffled in the background, like bare feet across concrete. She screamed, but that wasn't the worst part. The scream cut off not like someone stopped recording, but like her lungs were ripped empty. And then, another voice, a man's voice, raspy, cold. She shouldn't have recorded this. I tore the headphones off like they were burning. I don't scare easily, but this was different. That voice, I don't know how, but it knew I was listening. That wasn't just some message caught on tape. That was a warning. I spent the next hour trying to find anything on Jenna Hall. Obits, missing persons, socials, nothing. Like she never existed. But someone wanted me to hear that tape, wanted me specifically. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. I've never seen her before. But somehow, I know what she looks like. Brown eyes, cracked lips, tear tracks on her cheeks, a bruised mark on her collarbone, a handprint. Big, too big. At 3:17 a.m., the tape started playing again by itself. Same message, same scream. But this time, the man's voice said something else. "This time, it's your turn." I ripped the batteries out. Still played, only stopped when I stepped outside. Away from it, far away. Next morning, I called an old friend of mine, Kenny Mercer, ex-detective. Now runs a private security firm out of Charleston. If anyone could dig up a ghost, it'd be Kenny. His response chilled me worse than the tape. "You shouldn't have played it, Ethan. You know it," he paused. I got the same tape. 2 years ago, different voice. Same ending, same message. I threw mine in a river. Didn't stop the dreams. Though, what is it I don't know. But it always starts with the tape. That's when I knew I couldn't walk away. Not again. If Jenna Hall was real, I had to find her. If she wasn't, then whatever voice that was, I had to know why it sounded so much like mine. I started with the cassette. Kenny still had a guy at the lab in Atlanta who owed him a favor. So I overnighted the tape with a burner name and a cheap return address. In the meantime, I did what I could on my end. There was one clue on the tape barely audible, buried under her breathing. I had to boost the levels and filter the static, but there it was, a train horn. Twice, long, short, familiar pattern, Amtrak. I pulled up freight and passenger schedules across the southeast, cross-referenced times with background bird calls at Carolina Wren. Unmistakable, and narrowed it to somewhere outside of Asheville. North Carolina. It was a reach, but the only lead I had. I packed up, left the recorder in the crawlspace, didn't need it following me, took a loaded duffel, some MREs, lockpicks, and my sidearm. Kenny called while I was on the road. "You sure about this?" "No." I checked again. Jenna Hall doesn't exist. Not legally. What do you mean? No birth record, no driver's license, no tax filings. Like someone scrubbed her clean, I hung up and drove faster. I found the house 2 miles off a dirt road, swallowed by trees, moss hanging from the eaves like dead skin. A mailbox out front had a name scratched off with a knife. Faint, but still readable hall. The front door was ajar. I stepped inside. The air was thick, not just with dust, but memory. Faint smell of rotting lemons. You know how smells stick to fear. This house reeked of it. Living room was empty except for a chair, overturned. Floorboards warped where something had been dragged. I didn't say a word, just listened. And there it was. That same breath. Not mine, not human. I followed it to the hallway. Every step creaked like bone. The walls were papered in old newspapers, all local. All dated within the same month, November 1998. Each headline was blacked out, save for one line. Circled again and again. Local woman found dead in locked room. The photo was smudged, but I recognized the eyes. Jenna, or someone who looked like her. The room where the body was found was upstairs. Third door on the right. I felt it before I touched the handle cold, biting through the leather of my gloves. I opened it, empty, except the mirror on the floor shattered. And the stain in the corner, it wasn't just dried blood. It was something darker, something wrong. It shimmered faintly in the shadow, like oil on water. I reached down to touch it. Don't ask me why, I just needed to. Then came the voice, not from the hallway, not from the floorboards, but from the closet. She's still in here. It wasn't a whisper. It was a reminder. I spun, gun raised, breath held. The closet door was slightly open. Just enough for something to see me, but not enough for me to see it. I stepped back. Whatever was in there didn't follow, but I felt it, like being watched by something without eyes. I closed the door and backed out of the room. That's when I heard it again, the voice from the tape, but not a recording this time. She shouldn't have recorded this. This time, it was behind me. I turned fast, but the hallway was empty. Dead air, no sound, no life, until a bang not from upstairs, but from below, the basement. I hadn't noticed the door before. It blended into the wallpaper like it didn't want to be found. But now it was open, pitch black below, and something breathing in it. I stood there for a full minute, gun trained, heart like thunder. Then I closed it. Not out of fear, out of instinct. Whatever was down there wasn't part of this world. And if it was waiting, I wasn't ready. Not yet. I took what I needed, the newspaper clippings, a broken pendant I found under the floorboard, and an old recorder that looked like the same model from the package. The pendant was etched with something in Latin. Vox tenebris audit. The voice of darkness listens. As I stepped outside, I felt the temperature rise by a full 10 degrees. The sun had started to set, and in the distance behind the tree line I heard it, the scream from the tape. But this time, it wasn't a recording. The scream echoed longer than it should have, too long for a human throat. It bounced through the trees like it had direction, purpose. I froze, ears tuned, breath shallow. It was coming from the west. I moved toward it. I didn't run. I learned long ago not to chase things you don't understand. I just listened, tracked the sound like I would have tracked enemy movement in the jungle. Same alertness, same pulse in my throat. Half a mile in, I found her. Or, at least, I thought I did. A girl, maybe 20, barefoot, clothes torn, face turned away. She was kneeling in the dirt like she'd been placed there. Her body was stiff, arms at her sides. Still, too still. I called out, "Jenna, nothing." I got closer. Then I saw her eyes. They weren't looking at me. They weren't looking at anything. They were gone, black, sunken pits, not injured, not removed, missing, as if something had claimed them for itself. That's when I heard the other voice, not from her, from the trees. You're seeing it backward. I turned, weapon raised, but no one there. The girl's head snapped toward me with a crack of bone. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. Where were you when they died, Ethan? That voice, it was Sergeant Kavanaugh, my old unit leader. Dead 15 years. I took a step back, gun aimed, hand steady. You're not him. The mouth smiled her mouth, but not her expression. I was there, watching you run. Watching them burn. Shut up. It kept talking. You knew it would follow you, but you didn't warn them. The girl or whatever had taken her slumped over, lifeless again. That voice wasn't part of the tape. It was part of me. Flashback hit like a gut punch. Kandahar, 2010, Operation Silent Signal. We were tracking a rogue communications outpost buried deep in the hills. Got there. Found the place empty except one thing, a single transmission playing on loop. A woman's voice, crying, whispering. My name is Jenna Hall. I thought it was coincidence, a hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation. But now I knew better. This thing, whatever it is, it's been whispering for a long time, and it follows sound. I made camp in the woods, just far enough from the girl's body not to see it. Couldn't bring myself to move her. Couldn't bury her. Something told me if I touched her again, I wouldn't wake up. Midnight, fire's out. I heard footsteps circling the camp, no light. No voice. Just the crunch of pine needles and the soft dragging of something long and wet. Then, the recorder buzzed to life in my bag. I didn't pack it. I hadn't touched it since I hid it. It played the same phrase, over and over, louder each time. Vox tenebris audit. Vox tenebris audit. I smashed it against a rock. Still played. I buried it 6 feet down with the E-tool I always carry. Still, it didn't stop until dawn, and the moment the sun rose, it cut off. Clean, like someone hit pause. Next morning, I went back to the girl's body. Gone. No blood, no prints, just drag marks leading deeper into the forest, and the faint smell of lemons. I followed for 2 miles until I reached an old fire watchtower, long abandoned. There were claw marks on the stairs. Not animal, not human. Inside, a single table, a tape recorder already playing. No power source, no visible mechanism. The voice mine, not me, but my voice. I'm sorry I left you behind. I didn't know. I thought I was the only one. But now I see it. It's not after the week. It's after the witnesses. Then, silence. And from beneath the floorboards, knocking. 4 short, 1 long. Morse code, R-U-N. You ever hear knocking that didn't come from wood? That's the thing, it sounded like floorboards. But it wasn't. It had too much weight. Too much resonance. Like it came from underneath the tower. But not from any crawl space or basement. It came from below the ground. I stood there a moment, hand hovering near my weapon, just listening. 4 short, 1 long. Then again, R-U-N, I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I pulled up the old trapdoor in the corner of the tower, the one I was sure hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. There was no ladder, just a vertical drop into darkness and a cold breath that rolled upward like the earth exhaled. I tossed a glow stick. It fell 10 feet and landed on dirt, then rolled like something nudged it. That was all I needed. I climbed down. Tunnel walls were packed mud. Roots like veins ran across the ceiling. Someone or something had carved symbols into the dirt. Not words, not runes, just impressions. Like someone trying to speak without a language. The farther I went, the colder it got, and the louder the whispers became. They weren't in English. They weren't in any language. But I understood them. Memories, regrets. Every mistake I'd ever made murmured back at me in voices that didn't belong to the people I wronged, but knew exactly how to cut. It was like walking through the echo of guilt made real. Then I found the chamber. It opened like a cyst, raw and wet. Candles floated in air. unlit but glowing faintly, and in the center, a circle of cassette tapes stacked like a shrine. On top, a tape with my name burned into it. Not written, burned. I picked it up as soon as I touched it. The chamber reacted, air pressure shifted. Like something massive moved just beyond the walls. The whispers stopped, and one voice spoke. Clear, calm, play it. I should have dropped it, crushed it, burned it, but I didn't. I slid the tape into the recorder that materialized on a nearby pedestal. Don't ask me how it got there. Then pressed play. My own voice filled the chamber. I left them to die. I heard the signal and ran. I knew it wasn't human, but I ran anyway. I thought survival was worth the price. Then another voice. Jenna's. He's ready now. The recorder sparked, hissed, and melted in my hands. I dropped it just as the chamber floor cracked open in a ring around me. A deep hum began low enough to rattle bone, and from the crack, eyes. Dozens of them, human, animal, other, blinking independently. Watching me, the voice returned. You escaped once. There won't be a second time. I ran, didn't look back, climbed the tunnel faster than I should have been able to. Every root a handhold, every breath a countdown. I burst from the tower and hit the ground hard. No sign of the entrance behind me. Just soil and silence, except for one thing, a cassette recorder sitting on the forest floor. No tape, just a note taped to the top. Next time, bring her back. I stared at it for a long time, then packed it up and walked out of the forest. Didn't stop until I reached the road and saw headlights. Kenny. He stepped out of the truck, took one look at me, and said, "You found it, didn't you?" I didn't answer, just handed him the recorder. His hands shook. "Do you know what this means?" "No, but whatever it is, it's not done." We got back on the road, heading east. Kenny didn't ask questions, not right away, but he eventually said something that stuck with me. "You know, the voice we heard on our tapes, the one that speaks after the victim. Yeah, I ran a comparison last year. Spectrographic analysis, vocal frequency overlay. Took it to a guy in DC, and he swallowed hard. It's not human. It doesn't match any register ever recorded. But the structure, the waveform patterns." He paused. "It mimics the people we've lost, like it builds itself from the dead. That night, I dreamed of my squad again. But this time, they weren't burning. They were watching me, and in the dream, they were mouthing the same word, over and over. Listen, back in my safe house, deep in the backwoods of Oregon, the walls felt thinner than usual, like sound could bleed through them. The air smelled like wet leaves and old wires, and every creak of the floorboard under my boots echoed louder than it should have. I locked the door twice, then moved to the basement. That's where I kept my case files. A whole wall plastered with news articles, blurry photos, and post-it notes, the kind of setup that screams conspiracy to the untrained eye. But I knew better. At the center of the mess was one thing: the Jenna Hall recording. It hadn't just been a murder case. It had been bait. I queued up the digital rip of the tape on my old Marantz deck. Analog gear always sounded cleaner to me, more honest. I closed my eyes as the tape rolled again. I don't know who's going to find this. My name is Jenna Hall. Her voice cracked, not from fear, from cold. I could hear the shivers in the breath between her words. I went hiking 3 days ago. I got separated from my group. I thought it was the cold or maybe something I ate, but I started seeing things. I scribbled down timestamps, background anomalies, faint rustles at 023, a whisper I hadn't caught before at 0111, then something new. A third voice at 0244, male, croaking, barely audible. Buried, the gate. My blood ran cold. I boosted the gain, played it again. Buried, the gate, lies in sound. This wasn't in the original version, not the one I retrieved from police evidence. Something was rewriting the tape. I checked the waveform. It was nested inside her voice, hidden in the harmonics. It only surfaced when her frequency dipped during panic spikes like it needed fear to feed on, to speak through. I stepped away, took a breath, then noticed something on the far wall. A photo had fallen off one of the original black and white prints from the incident in Kandahar, the one with the burned-out shack and the signal tower, except now. In the photo, there was a figure standing near the ruins, a figure I knew wasn't there before. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like Cold War-era field gear, face obscured by some sort of static blur. I picked up the photo, turned it over. There, in handwriting I didn't recognize, we followed the sound. Only one came back. Then the house groaned. No wind, no rain, just a long, low groan like the structure itself had exhaled. My phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it ring 5 times. On the 6th, I answered. I didn't speak, didn't need to. The voice on the other end was Jenna's, but the real Jenna had been dead for months. I told you I didn't die in the cold. You still think it's about death, Ethan. It's about memory. The line cut. The house went silent. Then, the knocking began again. Not from the door, from underneath. 4 short, 1 long. I grabbed my gear, shoved the recorder, the tape, the photo, all of it into a duffel, and headed for Kenny's place. He had more equipment than me, more filters, more ways to analyze these voices. But when I got there, something was off. Front door open, lights flickering. I drew my sidearm, crept inside. Kenny. No answer. The house smelled metallic, like pennies and ozone. And there was this humming, not from the appliances, but from the walls, like the house itself was vibrating at a frequency just below the range of hearing. I followed the hum to the basement and stopped cold. Kenny was there, but not like I expected. He was standing in front of a wall of speakers, ancient reel-to-reel machines. Amps. Tubes glowing orange. His eyes were closed, mouth slightly open, and from every speaker, Jenna's voice, repeating the same phrase, "Don't stop listening." "Kenny," I called. He didn't respond. I approached, slowly, cautiously, and that's when I saw it. Thin black lines trailing from his ears into the reel machines. Not wires, not cords, veins. His veins had stretched, crawled, and embedded themselves into the tech. He was connected, literally. "Kenny," I said again, louder, "you have to stop." He opened his eyes. They were pure white, and he smiled. "They're tuning the signal," he whispered. "Once it's clear, they can cross." Then, behind me, a voice. Not loud, not whispering. Just "Final? Play the next tape?" I didn't play it, not immediately. I backed away from Kenny, my gun raised but useless. What the hell was I going to shoot vain speakers? The voice behind me repeated the command. "Play the next tape." I turned. No one there. Just the flickering lights and the low hum that was now vibrating through my teeth. I had one chance: kill the power, break the connection. I dropped the duffel, moved toward the breaker box on the far wall. Each step felt heavier, like gravity thickened around me. Static filled the air, dense and electrical, like walking through a storm cloud of noise. I reached the panel, yanked it open, and froze. The switches were gone. In their place, cassette tapes, melted into the metal, half embedded like tumors. Each one labeled with a name I recognized, people I'd lost, people I'd failed at the top. A fresh one burned in Ethan Crow. I touched it and remembered. Not just events, not just faces, feelings all at once. The fear, the pain, the guilt, the voices from the tunnels, the fire in Kandahar, Jenna's last breath on that cursed tape. Then I blacked out, or thought I did. Because when I came to, I wasn't in Kenny's house anymore. I was in the forest, the tower behind me, the one that had no entrance before, now fully intact, complete, rebuilt, and lit from within. I turned to see Kenny beside me, still plugged-in wires running from his ears into the trees, the ground, the sky. "Why am I here?" I asked. He smiled, but his eyes were gone, just empty sockets, filled with that same dull orange glow as the reel-to-reels. "You brought the story," he said. "Now you finish it." I looked down. In my hands, the recorder. It was running. I never pressed record. "I didn't ask for this," I muttered. "But you listened," he said, and the forest echoed him. "You listened, you listened, you listened." It came from the trees, the soil, the wind, even from beneath the rocks. A chorus of whispers layered over Jenna's voice. Now, playing endlessly in the background, something was watching me. Not a creature, not a man, a presence. It didn't hide. It didn't need to. It waited. And I suddenly knew where I had to go. There was a small trail I hadn't seen before, barely more than a depression in the moss. It led away from the tower, deeper into the woods, toward a ridge that overlooked a narrow valley shrouded in fog. As I walked, the recorder continued playing. But now, it wasn't Jenna. It was me, reciting things I'd never said out loud. Things I didn't want to say. Confessions buried so deep they'd never made it to daylight. Things like, I didn't just leave them. I knew they were still alive, and I heard them scream. And I still ran. I fell to my knees. The fog crept closer, curling around my body like fingers. From within it, footsteps. Someone or something walking toward me. Not fast, slow, deliberate. Heavy. I couldn't move. Then the recorder clicked. The voice changed again. This time, it wasn't anyone I recognized. Not Jenna, not me, not Kenny. It spoke in a language that bypassed words and hit directly in the gut, a sound that felt wrong in the bones. The fog parted, and there it was. A figure, 7 feet tall, draped in what looked like old signal cables and shredded army fatigues, where its face should have been. A cluster of rotating dials and cassette reels spun like eyes. It didn't walk. It broadcasted itself forward. Each step radiated distortion. I could feel my thoughts skipping, rewinding, overlapping. It raised one hand. Fingers made of tape ribbon. And it pointed to my chest. "You are the next voice," it said. Then the fog swallowed everything. When I awoke, I was back in Kenny's basement. The speakers were off. The hum was gone. The recorder sat in my lap, but the tape was missing. Kenny was gone. Just a stain on the floor. I sat there for a long time, waiting for something to happen. For the next knock, the next whisper, but there was nothing. Only silence and one final note on the wall behind me. Scrawled in tape, it remembers who listens. I didn't sleep. How could I? After what happened in Kenny's basement, my body refused rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing, the signal-twisted figure with dials for eyes, whispering truths I wasn't ready to hear. I stayed holed up in a roadside motel off Highway 20, the kind of place that hadn't been updated since the 80s. Smelled like mildew and despair, but it had 2 things I needed: thick walls and bad cell reception. Safe from signals, at least. That's what I told myself. I spread out my notes on the bedspread, carefully analyzing the timeline again. Jenna's recording, the voices beneath her voice, Kenny's transformation, the reappearance of that signal tower. All of it pointed to one place, Silver Ridge. It wasn't a name I'd seen in the files, but Jenna had whispered it in the last few seconds of the tape. I'd missed it before, barely audible under the static. Right before her voice dropped into that impossible second register. It wasn't a real town, not anymore. Silver Ridge had been abandoned back in 1974 after a chemical spill, according to official records, but there were no EPA docs, no environmental cleanup notes, just a handful of blurry news clippings and one surviving map, one that had been deliberately removed from all state archives. I knew a cover-up when I saw one. I left at dawn. The road to Silver Ridge wasn't on any GPS. I followed an old logger's trail deep into the hills. Tires crunching on gravel. The forest thick and unnatural around me. Birds didn't sing, wind didn't blow. It felt like the entire landscape was holding its breath. Then the trees parted, and there it was. A town caught in permanent rewind. Signs still hanging, storefronts coated in dust, cars rusted where they'd last parked, and in the center of it all, the radio tower, intact, buzzing faintly, like it never stopped transmitting. I parked a safe distance away and approached on foot. Sidearm ready, recorder in my coat pocket. The air shimmered as I crossed into the town limits. Not heat, not light. Signal. My thoughts distorted. My steps lost rhythm. I reached for the recorder instinctively. Hit play, and heard my own voice again, older, hoarser. I shouldn't have come back here, it said. I hadn't recorded that. Not yet, but the machine kept playing. I thought the tower was the source. It's not. It's the conduit. The gate is buried underneath it, the gate made of sound. I stumbled forward, disoriented. Until I reached the base of the tower, there was a hatch, metal, sealed with thick, rusted bolts. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. And yet, there were fingerprints in the grime. Faint, fresh. I loosened the bolts one by one. The moment the hatch opened, a wave of soundless pressure blasted out like the air had been vacuum sealed and was now screaming to be free. I gagged, my ears rang, blood dripped from my nose. Then I descended. A staircase, steep and narrow, led down into a black void beneath the tower. Each step echoed for too long, longer than it should have. Eventually, I reached the bottom. A room, circular, concrete, lined with shelves of magnetic tape. Hundreds of them, thousands, each one labeled with a name. Some familiar, some not human. I reached out, pulling one off the shelf at random. The label read, Jenna Hall, Final Transfer. The tape was still warm as I held it. The walls pulsed, like a heartbeat. And I realized the room wasn't dead space. It was alive. It was listening. Then a new sound. Footsteps. Not behind me. Above. Someone was in the tower. I heard the relay switch click and the signal whine begin. The broadcast was starting again. I scrambled back up the stairs, emerging just in time to see the tower's lights blink red, then green, then white, and the speakers crackled. A voice emerged. Not Jenna. Not me. Someone else. I've been waiting. Ethan, it said. Your voice is almost ready. Then the tower screeched. Not audio. Pain. A frequency so high, so precise. It struck like a needle through my skull. I dropped the recorder, and the tape I'd brought with me, Jenna's tape, slid into the machine. No one touched it. It just knew. The signal spiked, and everything went dark. When I came to, it wasn't gradual. It was as if a light had clicked on behind my eyes. No disorientation, no pain, just instant, suffocating awareness. My surroundings had changed again, not the tower, not the bunker, not even the forest. A room, clean, sterile, soundproofed panels on every wall, a microphone suspended from the ceiling, and behind the glass, an observation window, empty, black, but I knew someone was watching. The chair beneath me was bolted to the ground. My wrists were unbound. But something told me I wouldn't be leaving. Not yet. Then a voice crackled from the intercom. Not through speakers, through the walls. State your name. I didn't answer. The room hummed, impatient. State your name, it said again. The tone was sharper this time, almost like static with teeth. I looked toward the microphone. Didn't speak. The walls pulsed. Then suddenly the air shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. She appeared across the room. Jenna. Or something wearing her face. It wasn't right. Her eyes were too wide, too still. Her mouth never moved when she spoke. Tell them, she said. Tell them what you did. I stood up, heart hammering. But the door remained shut. Jenna glided forward, feet never touching the ground until she was inches from my face. I screamed, she whispered, and you listened. That's all it takes. I shut my eyes, but the sound didn't stop. It got louder. Whispers, breathing, radio static, Morse code. Screams layered beneath lullabies. They weren't sounds anymore, they were thoughts. Not mine. The room dissolved, and I was back on the battlefield. Kandahar, my squad, the ambush. The flames, only this time I heard it. The broadcast, faint, but present humming beneath the bullets and blood. I watched as my team screamed into the dirt. And somewhere, the tape recorder rolled on, capturing every second. The thing in the tower had been listening long before I knew it existed. Then Jenna's voice again, cutting through it all. Everyone has a broadcast, a frequency that defines them. Some are loud, some are quiet, some never stop. I blinked, and the room returned, empty again. The tape machine across the room clicked on. Unreal. My name on the label. Ethan Crow, live recording. The tape spun, and out of the speaker came my voice, but not my words. They think I came here looking for answers, it said, but I already knew the truth. I came here to be recorded, to be remembered, to join the signal. No, I whispered, that's not me. But it kept talking. I didn't survive the ambush. Not really. I've been broadcasting since 2009. I've been whispering through the wires, screaming through the dial tone. I never left. None of us did. Then the reel stopped, and silence followed. The kind of silence you only hear in a vacuum. Absolute, then a knock. From inside the observation glass, I turned and saw myself, staring back, not older, not younger, just wrong. The other me leaned forward, pressed a hand to the glass, and mouthed, "Play the tape." The door opened behind me. Same forest, same tower. The loop had closed. I understood now. This wasn't about Jenna. This wasn't about Kenny. It wasn't even about the tower. It was about signal inheritance. The recordings don't capture sound. They capture consciousness. Each person who listens becomes part of the next recording, not metaphorically. Literally, layered like tracks on a cassette. Interwoven, fused. And the only way out is to pass it on. I stumbled back into the woods, dragging the recorder, Jenna's tape still inside, somewhere behind me. The tower screamed again. A new broadcast, one I wouldn't remember recording. I found my car. The road was clear. No fog, no distortion, but the static followed anyway in my ears, in my bones. When I turned the key in the ignition, the radio switched on automatically. My voice, and hers, and others. So many others. I reached for the dial to turn it off, but I couldn't, because some part of me wanted to hear it. To feel less alone, then I knew what I had to do. Drive, tell the story. Find someone else who would listen, because the signal needs a carrier, and I was tired of being the only voice on the tape. The drive back into town felt unreal. Roads that should have taken an hour now stretched and folded like a skipping record. Landmarks reappeared. Billboards repeated. I passed a dead deer on the shoulder of the road 3 times. Each time, its head turned slightly more toward me. The signal had left the tower. It was inside me now. Not a metaphor, not a haunting. A transmission. Embedded. Carried. Broadcast on frequencies not even human instruments could detect. I kept the radio off, but I could still hear it. Whispering behind my thoughts, like a memory playing on loop. One that didn't belong to me. I needed help, but who would believe me? Back in town, I avoided my usual haunts. I knew I couldn't trust anyone close, not when I didn't know what the signal could do, what it could make people do. So, I found someone off the grid. A contact I'd met years ago while tracking a missing persons case in Oregon. Name was Murphy, former codebreaker for the NSA turned conspiracy recluse. Lived in a concrete box below a junkyard, surrounded by copper wire, Faraday cages, and tinfoil-lined walls. I didn't have to explain much. I just handed him the tape. He listened. His face didn't change. But when it ended, he turned off the machine and looked at me like he was staring at a loaded weapon. "How many times have you played this?" he asked. "Once," I lied. He nodded slowly. "Then you've got time." "Not much, but maybe enough." He explained it to me in a way only a madman could. Said the signal worked like a virus, a living pattern that sought out brains as storage. The more it was heard, the more it spread, the more it learned, and worse, it adapted. "Old broadcasts just whispered," Murphy said, "but this one talks, this one knows. It's a recursive loop. Each person adds to it, feeds it, and the signal becomes more intelligent, more targeted." He pulled out a series of notebooks, flipping to a page with a rough diagram, concentric circles, arrows, numbers, and a symbol I'd seen burned into the basement floor at Kenny's, an impossible spiral. Twisting in on itself. "This isn't about possession," Murphy said. "It's about replication. Consciousness transfer through waveform." "Then how do I kill it?" I asked. He laughed. "No one's figured that out. Best you can do is quarantine it." Then he did something unexpected. He smashed the tape, crushed it under a hydraulic press. "I can't risk it spreading," he said. But I already knew it was too late. The recording wasn't just on the tape. It was in my voice, my breath, even in the silence between my words. Murphy must have seen something in my face. He stepped back, hand drifting toward a drawer I knew held a revolver. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, "but I think you're already hearing it." He shook his head. No, I'm..." Then he froze, eyes unfocused, lips moving in sync with a rhythm only I could hear. He was broadcasting. I bolted, out through the junkyard, gravel skidding underfoot. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of town, where the static finally dulled like something inside me had passed through a dead zone. I sat in my car for a long time, just breathing. No radio, no tape, just silence. But even that was starting to feel unnatural that night. I drove to the highest point in the county, an old fire lookout with no electricity. No cell service, no signal at all. I took only what I needed: food, water, my sidearm, and a notebook. That's where I wrote this. That's where I'm still writing it. Because I need someone to understand, to know. I don't know how long I can stay out of range. The signal finds you eventually, in dreams, in echoes, in things you think you imagined. And if you're reading this now, if your lights have flickered lately, if your phone makes sounds when it shouldn't, if you hear breathing when you're alone, you may have already heard it. I almost didn't record this last part. Something about putting the end of it into words feels final. Like closing a door I might never open again. But if you're hearing this, if you've made it through the static and the distortion and all the cracks in reality, you deserve to know how it ends. After months of silence, the recorder came back on by itself. I hadn't touched it. I'd left it locked in a case, wrapped in lead foil, buried beneath 3 feet of concrete. But somehow, it was sitting on my table when I woke up this morning, a single red light blinking. Recording, I listened. It was my voice again, older, worn out, breaking. I'm at the tower, the real one this time. My own voice described a place I hadn't been, a stretch of land in the Arizona desert, where the horizon bends at impossible angles, and the wind carries voices that don't belong to the living. Coordinates were whispered through static. The tape ended with 4 words. Burn it to ash, so I went. I don't know what I expected. Some kind of government black site. Another dream-stained hallucination. But what I found was a rusted structure half buried in red sand. A vertical cathedral of twisted metal and broken reels, humming with invisible power. And she was waiting. Jenna, still alive, somehow, but she looked thinner, like light passed through her a little too easily, like she'd spent too long as a memory. She didn't speak right away, just handed me a box of matches and pointed at the base of the tower. Inside, hundreds of spools, all labeled, all dated, all bearing names I'd seen in the reports. Once it records you, she said, her voice almost inaudible. "It doesn't need you anymore, but as long as the memory exists, you're still part of it." I looked down. There was one last reel. Ethan Crow, Draft 2.0. That was all I needed. I poured gasoline across the floor, soaked every inch of wiring I could reach. Jenna helped. Or maybe she was just a projection of what I needed to see. Either way, we lit the fire together, and as the flames climbed, the tower screamed, not like metal, like people. Hundreds of overlapping voices, all trying to outshout each other, begging, accusing, singing in reverse, the kind of noise that tears at your brain and makes you doubt whether you've ever heard real silence in your life. We walked away without looking back, because that's what you do with ghosts. You don't stare. You don't listen. You forget. That was 3 days ago. Since then, nothing. No whispers, no new recordings, no phantom voicemails, just quiet. But I know better. The signal doesn't die. It waits. It rebuilds. Somewhere out there, another tower is rising. Another story is being told. Another voice is being archived. Maybe yours. So if you hear a recording that doesn't have a source, if your own voice starts speaking words you don't remember saying, burn it before it remembers you. And if you made it this far, then congratulations. You listened to the whole thing. You're part of the memory now. See you in the next Twisted Mystery.